A nation tonight stands shaken but resolved to move on as a religious leader dies in a horrific plane crash.
Also tonight, we talk to a member of the Bahamas Faith Ministries as they come to grips with the death of their spiritual leader.
Contributing factors that may have led to that fatal crash on Sunday are examined tonight. We've got all the details, so stay tuned.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Every Day.
The Bahamas woke today a nation shaken as yet another aviation tragedy strikes the country. This one of epic proportions, not only for us, but for the world. It was on Sunday, November 9th. Following the horrific crash of a Lair 36 executive jet, 9 passengers, 7 religious leaders and 2 pilots died.
Now, following the crash, a search and rescue team was quickly mounted in the area of the Grand Bahama shipyard, but no one was found alive. Megan Shepard was on the scene when the bodies on board that ill-fated flight were recovered.
Police cars and EMS officials swarming the Grand Bahama shipyard Sunday evening as news quickly spread about a plane that crashed near the dump site on the grounds. It was shortly before 5 p.m. when the jet grazed a crane at the Grand Bahama shipyard and exploded on impact. Officer in charge of Grand Bahama, Emerick Seymour, meeting with members of the press in the conference room at the Grand Bahama shipyard shortly after the tragic incident.
A twin-engine plane, apparently en route from Nassau to Freeport, apparently crash-landed in the Grand Bahama shipyard facility. The plane would have reportedly hit a pole, hit a crane, and then crash-landed into the recycle dump site.
A crowd began to gather outside the facilities as word spread that world-renowned motivational speaker and pastor of Bahamas Faith Ministries International, Miles Munroe, may have been on board, while work crews could be seen digging and lifting debris as the recovery effort went on for more than 7 hours. Grand Bahama experiencing adverse weather on Sunday with heavy rainfall, thunder, and lightning storms. But ACP Seymour says it is still too early to determine if weather played a role in the fatal crash.
I have no idea, ma'am. Like I said, this is initial stage investigation. All of them will have to be, anytime there's a crash, the police along with civil aviation will definitely be on the ground tomorrow to assist with that investigation. So, so I can't say at this stage what caused or what contributed to the crash.
Hours later, larger cranes were then brought in and pieces of the mangled plane could be seen hovering in the air. Seymour says these pieces will not be moved until Monday morning.
I'm leading the investigation on this from the police perspective, and of course, as this investigation develops, I'll be briefing you accordingly.
Several hearses were at the scene waiting for hours, and then around 11:30 p.m., the bodies were all loaded into the awaiting vehicles and transported to the morgue at the Ram Memorial Hospital with police escort. The bodies were recovered by work crews who spent hours in the pouring rain. ACP Seymour is thanking those at the Grand Bahama shipyard for their efforts in this major tragedy.
Yeah, they're doing a massive job for us.
Megan Shepard, ZNS Network News.
The nation and by extension the international community scrambled for details, confirming or denying what many speculated to be their worst fears. Confirmation finally came as thousands of parishioners of Bahamas Faith Ministries International packed the Diplomat Center on Carmichael Road to await word.
Now, it was there that those fears became bitter reality as the pastoral team of the church stood to tell the world that their leader had been aboard the ill-fated flight. Clint Watson was there as our team coverage follows a nation shaken to its core.
The aircraft involved belonged to Dr. Miles Munroe, founder, president, and senior pastor of Bahamas Faith Ministries International, who was on board at the time, along with his wife Ruth Ann, and Dr. Richard Pinder, Senior Vice President and Pastor of Bahamas Faith Ministries.
Pastor Dave Burrows, along with the Pastoral Council of Bahamas Faith Ministries, delivering no doubt the most difficult task of their duties. Confirmation that their top leadership were aboard that fatal jet crash in Grand Bahama Sunday afternoon around 5:10 p.m. as the flight was making an approach for landing at the Grand Bahama International Airport. It is reported the plane, due to poor visibility and bad weather, was flying low and hit a crane in the Grand Bahama shipyard. Also on board, youth pastor Lavard Manifest Parks, his wife Riddell, and young son Johannan, a foreign male pastor, and the two pilots, Franchin Cooper and Stanley Thurston. Dr. Munroe's children were already in Grand Bahama and were told they were also at the crash scene. As to what led to the crash, while there is speculation, the Department of Civil Aviation said a full-scale investigation commenced this morning at daylight. Dr. Munroe and his team left following their Sunday service here in New Providence to head to Grand Bahama for his annual Global Leadership Summit. That summit stage at the Grand Lucayan Resort will continue. Nonetheless, BFM's leaders and members are still trying to come to grips with this tragedy.
Well, we are all trying to console each other at this point in time because it's a terrible shock and it's very difficult for everybody. So we are just calling on the faith that we have and, asking God to help us during this time. Dr. Munroe is our foundation. He's the visionary. He is the driving force behind everything that we've done, and he's been the inspiration for all of the people here in this boardroom and for people worldwide.
Pastor Burrows says as hard and incomprehensible as this loss may be, the church must find the strength to go on.
I'm sure Dr. Munroe would want us to go on. And from his life and his inspiration, we know that we must go on. And so we are prepared to regroup. We are prepared to deal with the road ahead. And in that regard, we ask the entire Bahamian and international community for your prayers and your support as we proceed forward.
Dr. Munroe's last message hours before his death was to maximize your potential, look beyond your job, and find your purpose in life. Clint Watson, ZNS Network News.
Prime Minister the Right Honorable Perry Christie spoke late last night following confirmation of the tragedy and said that it is utterly impossible to measure the magnitude of Dr. Munroe's loss to the Bahamas and to the world. Mr. Christie said that Munroe was, in his words, indisputably one of the most globally recognizable religious figures in the Bahamas that has ever been produced. In offering his condolences, he acknowledged the difficulty that the BFM family must now endure in the face of this tragedy.
I hope, therefore, that all my fellow Bahamians will hold the BFM membership and the family of those who died in their thoughts and prayers in the coming days. But in truth, we all need to comfort each other because the loss of Dr. Munroe is the loss that we all feel as Bahamians and as a Christian nation. Reverend Dr. Myles Munroe was a great Bahamian of universal renown who leaves our nation and the world a better place because of the power and passion of his preachings and the excellence of his example. He will be greatly missed both here and abroad.
Now, Dr. Myles Munroe had a long and illustrious career in Christian ministry. We take a look back now at some of the themes which followers would remember about the man who never lost the common touch.
Elephant, and he sees the power, the strength, the might of that.
His teachings brought life to the kingdom message he centered his ministry around. But Dr. Myles Munroe was more than a preacher. The 60-year-old founder of Bahamas Faith Ministries International inspired countless people from around the world with true-to-life lessons which transcended the Christian experience. In his more than 30 years of ministry, Dr. Munroe used his purpose to draw out the same from others.
That's why it's important to announce what God told you. When you make it public, you put pressure on him. Oh, come on, young man. You got to talk about your vision. You got to talk about your dream and tell everybody, God told me this. God told me this. God told me this. And he has to protect his reputation. Clap your hands and scream hallelujah.
Dr. Munroe's reach was vast. He was a motivational speaker, best-selling author, and business consultant to governments and Fortune 500 companies. He authored more than 38 books, many of them bestsellers. He was also the chief executive officer and chairman of the board of the International Third World Leaders Association. Locally, the beloved minister, whose insights captivated audiences of all classes, was the country's youngest recipient of the Queen's Birthday Honours of the Order of the British Empire Award in 1998. Outside of his church, he was very vocal on national issues, most recently the gender equality and gaming debates. Last week, Dr. Munroe returned from a tour of Africa. During an interview in Kenya, he eerily referred to the end of life.
Go to the cemetery and disappoint the graveyard. Die like the Apostle Paul, who said, I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. I have been poured out like a drink offering. There's nothing left. I am ready to die. That's the way I want to die. I want to die because there's nothing else to keep me alive. I've done what I was born to do.
This portion of the news is brought to you by Lux Men's Warehouse.